From the bridge deck to the truss struts and all of the timber in between. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Jason Burns.
And I'm Danny Nucci, and this is the What About podcast. What was that word? Truss trucks?
Truss struts, part of the
Can you
makeup.
say truss struts, truss trucks?
Susie sells truss struts down by the seashore.
I was like, I can't really have a hard time pronouncing truss struts.
We had an interesting conversation the other day, Danny, with Chris Bauer, who was born Mark Bauer. And I came across an article today that I thought was really interesting that I wanted to bring up with you. These are famous characters whose names are actually different than what we know them as, their actual names. Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. Do you know his real name?
The actor?
No, the character.
The character's name isn't Shaggy?
No.
Ruh-roh. What's his
Norville Rogers.
Norville Rogers? That sounds made up. Is that really it?
Yeah.
Like, hey, man, no one calls me Norville anymore, man.
Zoinks! My name's Norville.
Zoinks! Why just call me Shaggy, dude?
Captain Crunch. This is a fun one. Horatio Magellan Crunch is his actual name.
Horatio? Yeah, Captain Horatio cereal does not sound appealing.
And my personal favorite, Mr. Peanut, Bartholomew Richard Fitzgerald Smythe Peanut. That's his full name.
Wow. I mean, somebody is just needs a hobby. What? That's a long name.
Right. Yeah. Somebody, but most of these characters were created a long time ago too. So,
Yeah, I guess. Okay, sure. Yeah. I'm down with it.
Are you down with covered bridges?
First of all, until I became familiar with the subject, I was not, nor could I have cared less. Has my mind changed? I also appreciate the passion that she had for this, Kim Varney Chandler, and how she ended up writing a book on covered bridges. The book is called Covered Bridges of New Hampshire. You can get it on her website or a New Hampshire gift shop, which we talk about later.
Or reluctantly Amazon.
Or reluctantly Amazon, yes. So, without further ado, Kim Varney Chandler. Did you have storm issues like Jason?
No.
I mean, he almost died. You know, we almost lost him. Did he tell you this?
Seriously?
Oh yeah, no, we almost lost him. He was almost. This was never going to happen.
No.
Oh my God, what happened?
It was in the morning. I was getting into my truck and I heard the tree crack. You know, the sound of when you know a tree is coming down somewhere. And I turned this way to my left to see where the tree was coming down, and it came down on the right next to me across my truck as I was getting into it.
Oh my God.
Is that nuts?
I was a couple inches away from being smushed.
And he literally showed me pictures. I was like it hit the truck. You could see the dent. It was not pretty. It was it's one of those things you laugh about now, like, I almost got killed. But
yeah, my head is hard, but not as hard as my truck, so I don't think it would have been very good.
But I'm glad you didn't suffer any effects of the storm.
No, we didn't. We live up on a hill, so we don't flood, which is nice. But New Hampshire had a lot of pretty bad flooding. So
yeah, I mean, it looked awful, especially when it gets this cold. I mean, we have floods here, I live in Los Angeles. We have floods here in California, but it's warm. It's a little different. It's a little different when it's cold.
But you have the mud too, which is
we have mud, we have earthquakes, we have fires. But
there's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, Kim, if you can get us started, I want to start with my favorite part of your bio, which was dog lover. I'm curious how have our four-legged friends played an important part in your life thus far?
They have. So it's funny. When I was little, my parents got a dog, and we kept the dog for a few days, and the dog got into things, and then the dog went away. And then we got a second dog, and the same thing happened. So when I was 30 years old, I got my first chocolate lab. And the love of a dog is just absolutely amazing. So we're on our fourth dog now, and her name is Pemmy, after the Pemigewasset Wilderness in New Hampshire.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah. And she's a trained therapy dog. So she and I do animal assisted interventions together.
Hold on.
It's really fun.
Wait a minute. I need to know about this. How did you discover that A, your dog was capable of doing this, and B, how did it become a thing?
Well, she actually, I in my role as a school counselor, I worked with another counselor who had a therapy dog and also does horse therapy as well. So
That
she
I'm familiar with. Most high end rehabs have equine therapy. Like
yeah,
literally, like if you go,
yeah,
like you get, like it's part of the thing. Like you get the hot tub and equine therapy as
excellent. Yeah,
as the deal.
Does the
yeah.
horse come into the hot tub with you?
I don't think it does. I'm gonna say for insurance purposes, I don't think that's part of it. But back to you. She did obviously equine therapy and also dog therapy with dogs,
hmm
and you saw the effectiveness of it, or you were like, I can do this.
I did, and I felt like, whenever there's a dog somewhere, everybody gravitates to the dog. Everyone's voices raise up, and they're either talking to a baby or they're talking to a dog. And just in my work with students, it's having a dog in the school makes a huge difference. And kids that won't normally maybe talk or come visit you will come
Wait,
in.
Mm.
Pemmy comes to school with you every day?
Not every day. She has a busy schedule, but yeah,
Well,
she's
she needs to do supervision, right,
yeah,
with the other
yeah,
dog therapist.
yeah. And part of passing the test, the test is really more for the human. It's basic counseling skills. They don't want you to go into a hospital and ask people personal questions or not be polite or whatever. But she has to pass a basic handling test, and one of them is she has to walk by another dog and not interact with it, which for her is impossible.
The
She's like, a
dog. Wait,
dog.
somebody is looking at this dog, going, "Let's see how she
Yeah.
does."
So she
Well,
almost failed because we had to do it twice because she just wants to play. She's a dog, you know.
and was
So
this a natural evolution from being a school counselor for you? We're like, okay, I'm going to try to find ways to be more effective, and you put the combination of your love for dogs, your understanding of this possibility,
Yeah.
and the work.
Yeah. And I also yeah, and we also have a wonderful dog. Like she's really I mean it. Other than chewing on our antique deacon's bench, she's a fabulous dog. So, yeah.
Do, and I had read that she also does some hiking therapy. Is that
Yeah,
right? And
well, she's a hiker.
mhm.
My husband has done, I don't know if you're familiar with the 4,000 footers. New Hampshire has 48
Oh
mountains that
yes,
are over
right.
4,000 feet.
Hmm.
And he's on his sixth round. He's done them in every season. And
Wow.
she's on her second round, but she finished her 48. So the Appalachian Mountain Club provides you with a little patch. So she has her patch on her
This is
vest.
sounding very much like you guys are just you finding reasons to bring your dog along. I mean, I'm just saying that's basically what it sounds like to me.
Probably a little. There's probably a little bit of that. Yeah.
Well, what's funny, Kim, is that it sounds like your background is similar to mine because we got dogs as a kid. I always wanted a dog. I always wanted a collie because I loved the show Lassie as a kid. And we got a collie, and then that collie attacked the mailman, and the collie had to go. So we never really had another dog. So when I got my own house and became an adult, I now have three dogs,
Yeah.
and I just keep pouring them into the house whenever
hmm
I can. Do you think the inability to have that dog as a kid is you're making you embrace it now as an adult?
I'm not. Maybe I've
Hmm.
always loved dogs. Always, and yeah, maybe if my parents listen to this, they might say, "Don't talk about us on the podcast." But
Don't talk about us. Leave us out of it. So what was the evolution? I mean, obviously, did you start off as an educator and then you became a counselor, or how did you become a counselor? Which we're going to get to, the book in a second. But I'm interested in how you ended up becoming a counselor.
well, when I was at the University of New Hampshire, I was a business major. I thought that would be practical, and it is, but I hated it. And when I was on campus, I was involved with student senate, and I wanted to be a dean of students. That was what my career goal was. And the dean of
What?
students,
So you're in business school and you're like, you know what? Dean of students.
yeah,
Was there a dean of students that you were particularly enthralled with, or
yeah, there was,
oh,
and
was it a he or a she?
it was a he,
Hmm.
and it was something that I thought I wanted to do, and he had a counseling degree, so I went back to get a master's degree in counseling with that goal, and did not apply for my internship in a timely fashion. So I ended up in a high school counseling office, and I was really frustrated by that. I was not interested in going back to high school.
A little different than dean of
Yeah,
students.
I didn't. I I was glad to leave high school. I didn't particularly want to go back, and I loved it. So
Mm.
Ah, see, it's always you just never know.
no,
Best laid plans, right?
right,
Are you
exactly.
back, or have you ever gone back to your own high school? Is that where
I don't
you're
work there.
currently?
No,
No, okay.
no.
That would probably be tough, wouldn't it, to go back to the same place that you went as a student?
Yeah, and I haven't lived in that area, so that helps.
But it was New Hampshire, right? I mean,
Yes,
you are a New Englander through and through. You live in New Hampshire
I
now,
do. I
obviously,
do.
up in the hills with no floods, right? Um, so, so, so then all of a sudden you decided, what? I'm going to be an author,
Sort of. That was
right? But isn't that how these things happen? You're like, you know what? I have an idea, and the next thing you know, you're doing it.
yeah.
Or not even an idea, a passion for the subject, it seems, too.
Well, yeah, and that was another accident too because I've always loved history. I would have majored in history, but I didn't want to be a teacher.
Wasn't practical, sure.
Right. Well, and I didn't want to be a teacher, which makes me laugh because that's what I've been doing for 28 years. But and when my husband and I moved to Hancock in 2012, there's a covered bridge here, and Hancock. Do you know where Hancock is, Jason? I know Danny
I
doesn't.
do.
You do. It's very small. There's, to go, you have to leave to get things. We do have a market, but if you need to,
Is it
real,
even considered a town, or is it a village?
it's
Is
a,
it like
it's a town. It's a town.
okay. Mhm.
But if you're going to go eastward, you have to go through this covered bridge. So, and we kayak under the bridge, and it just became part of our everyday life. And I didn't grow up near covered bridges, so I decided that I was going to take photographs of all the covered bridges in New Hampshire. So I made a list.
Wait a minute, wait a minute. I want to know when this idea came to you. So you're kayaking under the bridge and going, there's probably more of these. I think I'm going to take some pictures of these.
Yeah.
Were you a natural photographer? Was
Yeah,
this
I am.
a passion?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I made a list. I got hot on it right away. Went to local communities, took a lot of pictures, and then I just, like everything else, I didn't finish it. And then in 2020, I had some time on my
Time
hands.
on
You
the
had a little
hands.
time on your hands,
Yes.
did you? Were you shut in with a little time on your hands?
Yes. So
And did you go through the photos, or they were digital, I'm assuming?
yes. Yeah. So I got
And so you just went through the pictures and went, these are good. Wait a minute, these are good.
Well-
Wait a minute.
Well, it wasn't so much that, but I hadn't finished my list. So my husband and I thought, well, we can't get shamed for being out in public if we're outside. So we went and visited the rest of them. And I am naturally curious, and I wanted to know more about what I was looking at. And when you go to a covered bridge, there's no docent that pops out and tells you the history. So
That'd be dope if there was,
Wouldn't that
though.
be
Wouldn't that be
it'd be kind of creepy, I think.
Little hologram.
be kind of great, actually?
So wait, your husband has a list of all the mountains he wants to climb. You have a list of all the bridges you want to photograph.
Yeah.
There's a big all of component here.
Yeah.
Are you also Pokemon fans? You got to collect them
No.
all. Like
No. No. But yeah, so we anyway, I wanted to know more, and so I bought a couple of books. I looked online. There were little tidbits here and there, but not anything in one place. So I thought, well,
You mean there were books on covered bridges in New Hampshire, or covered bridges in general, or covered bridges all over the world?
both. Yeah, all of the above.
All of them.
But most of the New Hampshire ones, they'll have a photo, maybe an old photo, and then just basic stats about the bridge. When it was built, who built it, how much it cost, that kind of thing. So I decided to do some research. I went to the Historical Society of Cheshire County in Keene and was doing my research. And the director came over and said, "Well, what are you going to do with all this?" And I said, "I don't know. I'll probably do a website or something. I don't know." And he said, "Well, why don't you write a book?" And I thought, I can't. Books are real. I can't write a book. Like, what are you talking about? And he said, "Anybody can write a book, Kim." Like,
It's not true, actually, but go on.
So that's where it started for me, and so I spent the next 2 years traveling around the state, digging through archives, looking at records, talking to people who worked on the bridges, talked to communities that fundraised to save or to rebuild the bridges, and I found a publisher in Portsmouth, Peter E. Randall Publisher, and that's where I went from there. So it was really scary. It's a self-funded project, so which is good because I own it, but
So was the
scary.
momentum to get it done? Because it sounds like the more you researched it, the more you were into it, the more information was in essence required for your idea of what this book would be, right?
And I originally had a different publisher for um, a small kind of cookie cutter format. It was about, I don't know, 58 pages or whatever, and I almost immediately went over that limit, so I had to cancel the contract with them, which was it worked out being good for me because
Hmm.
I do own the book. It's mine, and the marketing degree and the business degree comes
Oh,
in
there you
really
go. That
handy.
plays in.
So
Yes.
there's some, yeah, there's some.
So next time my family and I come up to Jackson, New Hampshire, which is our spot where we go, are we going to find that book in all the warm and fuzzy New Hampshire gift shops?
Yes. Well, yes. All of the local bookstores carry it, which is fabulous.
Hmm.
I love to support
Zeb's
them.
in North Conway.
I don't know if
Shout
it's
out to
at Zeb's.
Zeb's.
I don't know if it's there or
Oh,
not. Yeah, but and I just felt like I wanted to pull it all together so I could know, and it's people have been pleased by it, so that's a good thing.
What about covered bridges? For people that actually don't know, like me, I mean, I had a sense of a covered bridge, but it wasn't until I went on your website and started looking at how cool they were. Can you sort of give our listeners sort of a perspective on what makes them so gosh darn cool? Because they're kind of great.
Yeah, they are. Well, they at one time in the United States there were probably over 10,000 covered bridges, and as
What's the origin, just so people get a sense of it?
well, the first covered bridge in the United States that we know of was built in the Philadelphia area in 1805, and it was a two-span, very large structure, and it was expensive. And after they built it, they thought, well, we should cover this so that we don't we don't lose it, because an uncovered wooden bridge will really only last about
Right.
20 years or
Sure.
so. And then around the 1820s,
So in essence, weather and concern for weather, and it was part of what prompted the covering of bridges.
yes,
I need a cover on my truck. See, this is what we need. This
it's
is bringing it all
or
back.
a cover on you, one or the other.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah, it's and so and they were pretty typical. So and then when people started driving cars, covered bridges were built for horse and buggy. They weren't built for box trucks, as we can see in the news all the time. They are hit constantly, even still. And so a lot of communities just took them down and put in a concrete or steel bridge to handle the weight of the cars. So it wasn't until the mid 1950s that communities started to recognize that they needed to save these covered bridges. So there are probably, I think, a little over 800 covered bridges left in the US. And
Wow, that's it.
yeah, and I think that's why it makes them special. And the communities that have a covered bridge, it means everything to
It's
them.
part of the reason why we go to Jackson, New Hampshire. It's like sort of this, romanticized view, like Norman Rockwell esque feeling of the town. And so I'm curious, when you started, Kim, I know there's quite a bit in New Hampshire, 60 or so. How many were there when you started this adventure? And did New Hampshire lose any of them today? Like, are there less today than there were when you started?
No, there are not less today, which
Mm.
is great. Yeah,
Hmm.
we have about 70 authentic covered bridges. 46 of them are over 100 years old, and there have been new covered bridges built using 19th century methods since the early 1970s. So there are more.
Really, in New Hampshire?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool. So just to basically they sort of keep the same motif in essence.
Absolutely.
That's really
Yeah.
cool. I did not know that.
Yeah. And
That they just went back to, you know what, let's build them, or if they had to refurbish them, they would make it a covered bridge, that kind of thing.
yeah, and New Hampshire's fortunate because there's a gentleman in New Hampshire named Arnold Grayton, and he and his father, who has since passed, Milton Grayton, really started to make a commitment to preserve covered bridges using as authentic methods as possible. You don't want to take a bridge that was built in 1829 and just slap some plywood on it. You want it to be fixed properly, and they started that movement in New Hampshire, but also nationally. And Arnold is 86 years old and still working on covered bridges. He has built several new covered bridges here, and he is a legend, and we're very
I was gonna
fortunate.
say he's an artist
Yeah.
with a very specific niche.
Yes, he absolutely
There's
is.
one that I'm recalling, Kim, in I believe it's Glen, New Hampshire, that isn't an active bridge anymore, but is used as almost like a gift shop. Does that still count as one of the 70?
It does. It does. Yeah, that bridge was built in the 1870s, I think, and it was maintained by the town of Bartlett for a really long time. And then they bypassed it. Instead of tearing it down, they built the highway around it because that's a pretty busy travel area.
Yeah.
And for a long time, they wanted to get rid of it. They used it for storage. They tried to sell it. Nobody wanted it. And finally, the woman that lived next door bought it for $1. And she was a seamstress crafts person, and she wanted to put a gift shop in there. So Milton and Arnold Grayton came, they restored the bridge, and they built a gift shop. And
Did she contact him? She's like, listen, I know who to call.
I'm sure she did. Yep. Yeah, and
That's amazing.
And it's a nice little gift shop, and there's a bed and breakfast right next
I
door.
mean, if you're going to go to that's the spot. If you're coming to New Hampshire, that's the spot.
And you're in the White Mountains, and it all just ties together and gives you this great, fantastic, like I said, almost Norman Rockwell look. But there's always the joke, Kim, that the leaf peepers are coming up, and it's that season is rough for those who live in New Hampshire. Aren't the covered bridges part of that equation? Aren't they?
Definitely.
What's a leaf peeper?
Oh.
So we have very spectacular fall foliage here, which
yes, of
you
course,
probably don't have in Los Angeles.
No, it's basically the same thing always. There's less leaves on the trees. That's about it.
And people come in droves to our state to look at
leaf peepers. Got it.
So, yeah.
Yes, of course. They want to come to New England to see the fall and the changing of the seasons. And that can get annoying, very much like down the street from my house where they come to see the Hollywood sign and you can't drive. Same idea.
Now imagine the Hollywood sign, but with orange and red hues all around it. Now, your book basically focuses on the covered bridges of New Hampshire, Kim. You said there's almost 800 in the rest of or in the country total. Mm-hmm. Is New Hampshire up there in terms of the state with the most?
No. Pennsylvania has the most.
Right? Pennsylvania. Well, of course, where it originated. I can imagine the Quakers going, you know what? We still have our horse and buggy. We still need the covered bridge.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is foresight for communities to want to save their covered bridges. So we've been lucky in New Hampshire that a lot of communities would either bypass the bridge or they would move it instead of just tearing it down. But a lot of
move the bridge. What experience do you have with them moving the bridge? What does that look like?
Well, here's the story.
Because that sounds like quite an undertaking.
Well, yeah. So there's a place in Lincoln, New Hampshire called Clark's. It used to be Clark's Trading Post, but now it's Clark's Bears, and it's
home of the Bears.
It's a roadside attraction. They have a amusement park type of thing in there, and they have trained bears that do tricks and whatever.
Hence Clark's Bears.
Yes. And they wanted to install what they call the White Mountain Railroad through their property. And the Pemigewasset River runs through their property. So they were looking for a covered bridge. So they went to Barry, Vermont in 1963. They bought a bridge, an old railroad bridge, for $1,000.
Who owns the bridge? They bought the bridge from whom?
Well, it was owned by the railroad, and the railroad ended. They stopped using the rail, so the bridge was owned by a private citizen. I don't know the details on
I guess whoever had the property, whoever had that particular property. Maybe. And they're like, hey, can we buy that bridge?
Well,
it's like, yeah, go ahead.
So they bought it for $1,000, and the
what a bargain!
And the body of a Ford.
Well, the other lady got it for $1.
I know, right?
Wait a minute. The resale on these things is kind of great.
And so they bought it, and they went up in the wintertime, and they took it apart piece by piece.
Oh.
And numbered every single piece and shipped it back to Lincoln. And then they put it
there near Clark's Bears.
Yeah, and they put it back together. And in the book that Clark's Bears put out, the brothers that did it, they called it Playing Bridge. Very clever.
I love a good pun.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do love a good pun.
And oddly enough, that railroad bridge is the only active covered railroad bridge in use in the world.
It's the only covered bridge that has a train that goes through it.
Yep.
Okay, so but
That's
as a
insane.
Granite State resident, do you feel like, well, this bridge is originally from Vermont? I mean, or do you accept it?
Is there New England rivalries? Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont,
Yeah, a little.
Mass,
A lot. Yeah.
Rhode Island,
A lot.
a lot. Interesting. I know it's so
Mhm.
tribal, isn't it?
Well, unless you're talking about sports teams, and then we're all on the same page.
Then
Yes,
it's all
correct.
patriots. The bane of my existence.
Are covered bridges getting a second life thanks to, not only like you were saying, you wanted to go around and take pictures of these bridges, Kim, but so because of social media, are people like Danny in Los Angeles seeing covered bridges on people's social media posts and creating an interest, do you think?
Yes, I do. So there's a national organization called the National Society for the Preservation of Covered Bridges. They're based in the New England area, but they're national. The president, Bill Caswell, lives in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. So they've been really close and very helpful to me. I could not have written this book without them. And they have an active social media presence. And there's one of the gentlemen on the board created a Facebook group called the Covered Bridge Experience. And there are several Facebook groups for covered bridges, but this is an opportunity for people all over the world to share their photos of covered bridges and ask questions, and people can talk about what's happening if there's a bridge that's been destroyed or damaged. And it's a pretty large community, believe it or not, and I think that has helped.
No, that's what makes it fascinating, is that it is a large community, that this has really piqued the interest of folks.
It
Hashtag covered bridges.
Yes.
So we have a listener question, if I may ask. Okay. And our listener is Florence D. And Florence asks, what is your favorite season for visiting a covered bridge? Is it with the spring flowers growing all around, a fresh blanket of snow on the roof, or something else altogether?
Well, I think they look different in every season. And I guess it depends on how much you want to see. So for me, I like to crawl down underneath and see what's going on and take photos down there. And sometimes in the summer or in the spring when the rivers are high, that's not a smart idea. So I think it depends. The fall in New England is beautiful. We've already talked about that, but
I know,
you get very different photos depending on what's surrounding the bridge. So I have some beautiful snow photos of covered bridges.
Yeah, the snow ones just remind me of a Robert Frost poem. Any Robert Frost poem, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so I would say all seasons, which is kind of a cop-out answer, but it's true.
Well, it's specific to each person, what their preference is, sure. But yours, you said, essentially is a time where you have more access to them.
And in the summer of 2020, there was a pretty significant drought. So
so the rivers were low.
Yeah, I mean, I have pictures from a place. I go back there now, and I'm like, oh my god, I was standing in there, like I was really lucky.
You find any interesting looking up at them, like things that people carved 100 years ago?
Unfortunately, you can see a lot of that. But being under some of them when the cars go over is really neat.
Yeah,
it's neat, but as neat as a tree falling right next to Jason. When we talk about neat, what do you mean by neat? It's just cool.
It's just you can hear it. You can hear it working. You can hear it creaking, and you can hear the load.
You must be able to almost see through the planks too, right? On some of them, where
some of them.
Ooh. Now, I know we're a little out of season for this, Kim, but there are stories of some covered bridges being haunted. And I was curious if you could shed a little light on some of those stories for us.
Well,
because Danny knows I love this stuff.
He loves this stuff. It's and you have to figure New England covered. There's got to be a ghost in there somewhere.
Well, there's one bridge that if you Google haunted bridges in New Hampshire, you'll get the Blair Bridge in Campton. The bridge hasn't had a particularly good time, and the first bridge was built, I think, in 1828 or 1829, and it was built because the community had just hired a new doctor from Dartmouth, and he was trying to cross the river to go to church, and he fell through the ice and his horse drowned and he almost drowned, and it was a pretty big deal. So they built this bridge. And in 1869,
how kind of them,
right? Right. Right.
The guy almost froze to death in a pond trying to serve the community. And they're like, well, maybe we'll build a bridge for this guy.
Well,
Sorry,
they
go
were
on.
probably also being selfish because he was probably the only doctor at the time, too.
my
So they're
goodness.
like, well, yeah.
Okay, so they decided to build this bridge.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So that bridge stood until 1869, and a gentleman from the area who was a Civil War veteran and clearly experienced some type of mental illness or maybe post-traumatic stress, which I would guess, put a wagon load full of hay on the bridge, unhitched the horse, and lit it on fire and burned the bridge down. And when he went to trial, excuse me, he said God told him to do it. So clearly he was suffering. And
How things haven't changed. Go on.
So they rebuilt the bridge in 1870, and that structure is still there today. And it's been damaged many times. It's also over the Pemigewasset River, which can get pretty high pretty fast. In 2011, it was damaged. There was a huge pine tree that went right through the roof of it.
No, I have PTSD on the
Yeah,
tree.
Exactly. So I don't know that people think it's haunted
Cursed.
necessarily, but it certainly has had its share of bad luck. And in my research, I found that the gentleman that built the structure in 1870 was actually struck by a train and killed, which is not a good way to go.
Oof. Quick, though, you got to figure, right?
I would hope so.
Danny, one of the things I love most about New Hampshire is that there were a lot of like these roadside attractions in New Hampshire. And Kim, when I go up there with my family, we always visit Santa's Village, but you drive by the bones of Six Gun City, and that looks like an old Scooby-Doo place that is haunted. I have to get in there one time with a flashlight.
Yeah, I saw that on Facebook recently. Somebody was in there taking pictures.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, and the other one is Benson's Animal Farm. Did you
Oh,
go to
yes.
that?
Yes, I did. Yep.
Well, when we were shooting a television show in Massachusetts, and he's like, "We're going to Portsmouth." I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, we're going to Portsmouth." I'm like, "For what?" He goes, "You're gonna love it." Literally, just drove me to Portsmouth to kind of check it out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I would live in New Hampshire in the mountains, but alas, my wife is not a mountain liver. So here we are in Massachusetts, just leaf peeping. We leaf peep, yeah. We angry. Right. We make everybody angry.
I don't think it makes too many people angry because if the leaf peepers didn't come, a lot of those businesses would not be open. So people are happy about it.
Brings in the dollars.
Absolutely.
Leaf peeper dependent, of course.
So next time I'm in New Hampshire with my family, or next time Danny's in town and I make him come to New Hampshire with me, what is your favorite covered bridge in the state of New Hampshire?
I knew you were going to ask me that. Well, I can't pick a favorite. That'd be like picking a favorite child. You all have one, but you don't admit it.
Don't.
And
I don't. I'm like, I really don't have one. Not just because they listen to the podcast. I just actually don't. It's so weird.
Well, that's good.
I have a favorite dog. 3 dogs. I have a favorite, but I wouldn't tell them.
I think what's neat about some of the communities is there are multiple covered bridges in a small area. If you go all the way up to Bath, which is in the northern part of the state on the Connecticut River border-ish. There are 3 covered bridges there, including the oldest one in the state. And those are a pretty quick drive to see all 3, without too much hassle. If you're in my area of the state, there are 6 in this general area that you can see in about a half a day. They're not far. They're all different. They're all beautiful. Some of them look like they were built to serve a purpose, and they're not fancy. And then others are absolutely stunning.
Works of art. Yeah.
Ornate,
well, some of the ones in your book are just outstanding. I mean, just beautiful. I mean, I feel like I'm, back during the Salem witch trials, running away.
With Ichabod Crane and
literally, that's the vibe I get. Wow, man! I want to meet the artisan. I want to find out like what makes these guys tick. So the dad and the son. That was really kind of cool.
I just want to meet Pemmy. I'll be honest with you. That's where
you're obsessed with the dog.
A dog, a hiking
therapy dog.
Hiking therapy dog.
It's a hiking therapy dog. basically, that's what really should have been the subject: is
I know.
hiking therapy
I know.
dogs.
I didn't know at the time though.
So this is just one of those other things that have come out of the pandemic that would have never
I
happened.
know.
She would have never finished this book. She would have continued to be busy, and now we have this lovely book, and apparently, a fervor for covered bridges societies and Facebook groups, and it's kind of great. It's kind of cool.
Do you know of any covered bridges in California around you? Is it
No.
Yeah. It seems like a very New England thing.
I mean, I might be more aware of it now, but
Hmm.
if I see one, I think the only place I would think around here would be Pasadena because it's really old. But I don't know of any covered bridges.
I always think of the scene from Funny Farm. Do you remember where they're going over the covered bridge? It's like the delivery truck with all their furniture, and it's like falling apart as they're driving over.
No,
No, you're not a Funny Farm
don't
guy?
recall that.
Wow.
No, I don't know from Funny Farm.
Chevy Chase? Chevy?
I don't recall.
Okay.
I do not
All right.
recall.
I'm
I'm sorry. I should be yes-anding you.
I'm going to
The truth is,
slink
I don't
into
fucking
the
know.
shadows of the covered bridge and be done.
Well, this was cool, man. Short, sweet, but I think right to the point and enjoyable. So I want to say to everyone, thanks for listening.
Music by Denny Nucci. Produced and edited by the same two people you heard hosting this show because they have no friends.